This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library
enough, you can get the TrueFire All Access Pass for as cheap as they ever do it, the $99 thing. So just jump and do that if you're looking for the best price that you can get TrueFire All Access for.
Okay, one of the things that I kind of felt like I had a balance of that was okay was sort of playing with melody and trying to be a bit more melodic. Part of the reason for that is that sometimes some of you guys tell me you like some of my melodic playing or that sort of stuff, or some of you ask me about that sort of stuff. But I got an email yesterday from a chap who basically said, you know, I'm really impressed with the arpeggios and stuff that you're doing, but when are you going to play a melody? Think of Brad Paisley, Santana, and Mark Knopfler. Now, it's not to besmirch any of those three guys, but I kind of checked out a bit of Brad Paisley playing, and the first thought that I had when I heard it was not that that's super melodic playing. Mark Knopfler, the first thing that I hear when I hear the name Mark Knopfler is that Sultans of Swing thing, which actually starts with an arpeggio. So that kind of got me thinking, well, if you're saying that I play like lots of arpeggios, then that most iconic part of Mark Knopfler's playing is an arpeggio. And I was just thinking, like, what am I missing here? So in this video, I kind of wanted to like look at what is melody, how we play with it, how I think about it, but more than anything, also acknowledging that we all hear melody a bit differently, and someone else's melodic playing might be entirely different to what I think of as melodic playing. For me, I think of Eric Johnson, Marco Strogley, Duke Levine, who else? You know, there are, to me, like, what I look for in a melody is going to be, I think, different to what some of you guys are looking for. I think that's okay, but bear in mind that I'm not talking about this as if I'm some sort of guru of melody. This is just kind of some of my thoughts on it. So, first of all, I wanted to read a definition of melody. So, a sequence of single notes that is musically satisfying, a tune. The aspect of musical composition concerned with the arrangement of single notes to form a satisfying sequence, a sweet or agreeable succession or arrangement of sounds. That's actually quite interesting to me. Now, the agreeable part there, to me, kind of does imply that all of this is still going to be fairly subjective. So, again, think of your favourite sort of melodic players and how you think about what they might be. It might be David Gilmour for you. It might be whatever. So for me, what I personally don't necessarily think of as melodic and don't necessarily think of as a route to melodicism is like super guitaristy stuff. And so things that like this sort of thing where you've got like lots of jumpy open strings. Now, these are like certainly idiomatic guitar phrases, but part of, I think, what makes a melody become a melody, potentially, and I think this is something that we maybe try to think about, is something that could be sung. And so if I... The human voice, except for like yodelers, tends to do things a little bit more stepwise. Now, this actually is another kind of, I think, potential pitfall of a thing. I was talking to some chaps about this the other day, because one of the key things that people talk about on the internet and on YouTube is the importance of chord tones and the importance of the caged system. This is not to say that there's no value to those things. There is immense value to those things. But what I don't think is that they're an immediate route to great melody. And I also think that they can be a route to potentially like overthinking things. So where things are simple, which is like a fair amount of the majority of music, I don't think you need to necessarily be spending tons of time thinking, right, on this chord I need to hit the third, on this chord I need to hit the five, on this chord I need to hit the flattened third or whatever. it's not that those wouldn't be useful things to be able to do or be able to pick out, but as you're improvising, I don't think that is the sort of stuff, or, you know, even it might suit written stuff a bit better than improvising, but I don't think you necessarily need to, especially depending on what level you're at. I think it takes a while to get something out of that kind of thing. So say I was playing in G major. I'm playing Wonderful Tonight. So what makes Wonderful Tonight to me, there are things that are super melodic. Like, so the Wonderful Tonight, in terms of what is that actually doing, third, we start on the third of the G, end on the fifth of the D, then on the third of the chord 4, the C. So you can analyze this stuff, and oftentimes it might work out that way, but you might also find the thing that I really think is true is that a melody kind of can stand by itself, and that is to me very true of the Wonderful Tonight thing. So if we just had an E minor, if we just had a D, like, it's still working over all these chords, and that to me is a little bit of, I think, sort of the secret to melodic playing in a way. Like, as long as you're very clear about what key you're playing in, let your instinct and your melodic sentiment kind of guide you in this, rather than getting super down in the weeds of, you know, just thinking, right, I need all these chord tones, I need to hit all this stuff. Just, I think, a lot of the times you can, and maybe this doesn't work for you, and maybe that's why you're thinking about these other routes, but for me, honestly, like, I'm trusting my instinct and that I can play in the key of G a lot more than I'm trusting that I'm landing on a chord tone of every single chord. Does that make any sense? So if you also think of, like, this, like, that is a great melodic solo from John Mayer's Gravity, and I think it works over a great array of chords. So originally it would be, let me just put in a looper. I'm going to play some chords that are not Gravity. So on E minor instead of the G. This would normally be a C. It's now a D. This would normally be a C, I think. Sorry, missed the melody there at the end, but you see the point, really. So the normal chord progression, like, the melody is strong enough that it stands by itself. Trying to think of some other example that would be easy to follow. What's the other? 1, 2, 3. So if we take. Now, if I was super focused on chord tones only, I think my thinking would be slightly different, and I think I would not arrive with the same melodies. So if I now start to think, so what was that progression? We've got F sharp minor. So if I think very chord tone based, we get an F sharp minor, then we get a B. What was it? F sharp minor. So we get an F sharp minor, B, C sharp minor. So now what I'm going to do is try and focus exclusively on hitting like the root of every chord, right? To me, it's not a total dead end, but it does squash my creativity. Let's focus now on the third, which I think this is, if there's one chord tone that you should focus on, this is the one that will make it sound like you're doing this anyway. So, thirds. Suddenly, now, there, I think, sounding like I knew what the chords were. It felt like I was connecting to the chords, just because instead of it being like a root jumping game, the root does not give any additional information underneath the chord that's already happening. The third is really the heart of the chord. Like, these two notes are not that interesting. This one, at the top there, actually is. So what I would do would be to think about where the third is against each of these roots. So for instance, you've got one on your G string, where else have you got one? So on our B string, it'd be here relative to a C sharp. B, here. What about if we were on our A string, E string, sorry, have the A there, and then C sharp, the E of the C sharp, and map your thirds that way. I think that could be a really good thing if you're wanting to like get a little bit of this chord tone type approach in a way that does not feel so by the numbers sort of stuff. If we were to try it with the fifths, I think you could get a similar sort of situation where it feels like maybe this is not. I'm out of it. Now the other thing is just to think about like just what can you sing? Can you sing it? arpeggios would sound like this. Which is often not what I'm doing. Now, here's my number one tip for this improvisation stuff. Now, one thing that really helps it make it seem like you knew what you were going to be doing is repetition. If you just repeat, it's not going to sound necessarily amazing. Take the AABA form. So what we're going to do is play a theme, whatever our melody that we sort of come up with. You could sing it in your head beforehand, and this is a good thing. So we're going to repeat this. Okay, then B. And then we're going to go back to A. So now I'm going to repeat that new phrase. B, we go away. One of the things that was kind of said in those definitions of melody is like the importance of it being singable. Something being singable is actually partly down to how much can you make it so that that motif is something that is in that person who is listening's head. And so I often use this technique if I'm starting a solo. I'm listening to the phrase and I'm going to play it again, play it slightly adjusted, but come back to it. I thought this was something I do quite often. You may not like it in my playing, or you may not recognize it as melody. It may not translate to every single one of you, but it's something I try to do, and it's something that other people have said that it helps them in their own playing. I think that's a really nice sort of little idea to hang your hat on, more or less. Another thing that I really like the sound of, that is a little bit more difficult to execute, is the sound of a sequence. Now, same sort of idea. Let's try again. So we're just... we're taking the same motif. Is my personal approach to some of this stuff. I'm thinking very heavily about what key am I playing in, and I'm trying to sort of play something that's roughly singable. Of course, you do all of the normal spaff stuff and playing fast licks in between this, but trying to have this melody sort of stuff that you hang your hat on, that maybe you don't see in my playing, but you see it in other people's playing. That's also fine. To me, it's not about arpeggios, caged, any of that stuff. For me, it's mostly hung on having a good knowledge of the major scale and being able to play it over the neck. And if you're going to take a little bit of this chord tone stuff, I would aim for the third and practice being able to just see the third. You don't need to be able to see every single part of it. See the root and the third, and this can be a little bit of a gateway in. AABA form makes it sound like you're improvising, particularly if like the first statement of it is like worthwhile. sound like you knew what you were doing, and you're coming back to it, and you're implanting in the listener's ear this idea that you really did intend for them to pick up on that melody that you were putting down. Anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on how to play melody versus playing scales and arpeggios. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Cheers for stopping by.